Today I'd like to talk a little bit about how getting things done can support your mental health. We all have mental health. Some people's mental health is healthier than other people's mental health, but we all have mental health the same way we all have physical health. And it's not an on-off thing. Mental health can deteriorate over time, it can improve over time. And like physical health, where if you've got a situation with your back that can sometimes lead to you being in a lot of pain, mental health is very similar. You can find yourself in a situation where you find things more overwhelming, more stressful, more depressing, more difficult to deal with than other people. And what I'd like to talk about today is about how we can use getting things done, some key concepts from getting things done, in order to give ourselves better general mental health, in order to support us so that actually over time we are fitter mentally. To explain what I mean, I'm going to use an analogy that Mental Health First Aid England teaches part of their mental health first aider course, and that's the idea of the stress bucket. We all have a bucket. Everybody's bucket is a different size, so everyone's bucket can hold a different amount. The issue isn't whether you've got a big bucket or a small bucket. The issue is knowing how big your bucket is. If you know that you've only got a small bucket, then you need to empty it more often. So in the case of the stress bucket, you start every day with a residual amount of stress in the bottom of your bucket. It would be fair to say that over the months that we've been in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, everybody's waking up perhaps with a little bit more in their stress bucket than there would have been beforehand. And then as the day goes on, certain things will add to that stress bucket. And the important thing is recognising when you're getting to a stage where the bucket is getting full. Because we all know, having been in situations where something apparently very small has tipped us over the edge into panic or fury, that actually sometimes it doesn't take much to make your bucket overflow. So the important thing to do is know how full your bucket is, know how full your bucket can get, and know what empties your bucket. Find things, and that might be reading, relaxing, listening to music, going for a walk, going for a run, that help to empty your bucket. And there's also a sense of not putting things in your bucket unnecessarily. So for some people, reading the news multiple times a day during the pandemic has led people to feel more overwhelmed. And so actually cutting back on what is putting stress into their bucket in the first place is a great thing. So to use that analogy, I'd like to talk about 3 quotes from David Allen that can help us with managing our stress buckets. So the first quote I'd like to bring your attention to is where David Allen says, "The sense of anxiety and guilt is the automatic result of breaking agreements with yourself." And that's the kind of anxiety and guilt that we can all relate to when you've decided you're going to do something, when you promise somebody else you're going to do something, and you forget to do it. You forget to post your mum's birthday card. Or you don't pick up the thing from the shop that you promised your friend you would get. Or you don't manage to make it home in time for bath time for your little ones. All of those things can lead to anxiety and guilt. And the more we add that anxiety and guilt to our stress bucket, the more likely we are to make ourselves susceptible to deeper and more significant mental health problems. Now, we do have a tool for dealing with this, and this is what we describe in Getting Things Done as the 5 phases of mastering workflow. Now, there are some great videos on the Next Action Associates YouTube channel about the different steps of mastering workflow, the 5 phases of mastering workflow. But just briefly, I'm going to talk through some habits that you can adopt as part of this that really help me to find I was taking on less day-to-day anxiety and stress into my bucket. So we start with capture. Don't keep things in your head. If something has your attention, write it down. It doesn't mean you have to do something about it, but just put it somewhere where you know you will then be able to make decisions about it later. Is a huge relief to know that you're not carrying around all these things that I really mustn't forget, I really mustn't forget, I really mustn't forget. Then give yourself time to clarify it. This is great because once you've captured all that stuff, you can sit down and say, what am I going to do about this, if anything? None of those things are commitments yet. This is the point at which you decide, actually, am I going to agree to do this thing for this person, or actually do I not have time yet? And you can make those decisions not in the spur of the moment, but with some consideration. You can then organise those things that you committed to do so that you are reminded about them at an appropriate time. So things you need to buy at a shop, go on a shopping list. Things that you need to do when you're at your computer, go on a list when you're at your computer. And never the twain shall meet. You need to build in time to reflect, to look at everything you've committed to renegotiate potentially some things that you've committed to that you now realise that you can't do, to understand to what degree your system is working for you, and to check in on maybe some projects that you're working on that maybe haven't moved. Maybe you need to think about if there's something else that you need to give them. But giving yourself that time and that space in particularly is a fantastic way of getting your brain out of the reactive nitty-gritty that we find ourselves in day to day, which can be hugely, hugely stressful. And all of this is to serve this ability to engage completely with whatever it is you've decided to do, knowing that it's the right thing to be doing, knowing that actually I'm going to make this video right now because it's the important thing for me to do right now, but later on I'm going to be able to sit and play video games with my little boy because I know I'm not going to have anything else to do. It's going to be the right choice that I'm making because I've gone through all of the steps. So capture, clarify, organise, reflect and engage. 5 steps, 5 phases, 5 habits that can really help support not taking too much into your bucket. The next quote from David that I think is really relevant to this topic is, he says, if you don't pay attention to what has your attention, it will take more of your attention than it deserves. Now this relates back to the capture step, but I'd like to take it a step further here because generally when we talk about capture, we're talking about, oh, I've just remembered that I need to buy milk. Write down buy milk, and then it's captured so that when you can then clarify it into your system and so on and so forth. Or capture might mean I've remembered that there is something coming up in a couple of weeks' time that I need to plan for. And you write it down and it gets it off your mind. The other thing though that I think we can capture and that often doesn't get talked about in this context is the stuff that comes out of our brain that we're actively working on or thinking about. So to give you an example, a few weeks ago I was writing an email and it was an important email, and it was an email to a reasonably important person, and I wanted to be very careful about how I worded it. I think particularly at the moment in the situation that we're in society, there's a certain sensitivity that I felt I needed to take into account when I was writing this email. And I overthought that email an incredible amount. I was thinking about it in the shower, I was thinking about it when I was making my lunch, I was thinking about it when I was trying to get to sleep at night, I was thinking about it when I woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning. And in the end, I just sat down and captured what was going on in my head. I sat down and captured, not that I needed to write the email, but all the phrases and sentences and words and formulations that my brain was throwing out at me, because it was relaxed into this kind of thinking creative, I am solving a problem kind of state. because I was overthinking it so much, I was actually starting to talk myself out and second guessing myself and starting to really, really become quite anxious about the content of this email. When I wrote it down, captured it, I stopped thinking about it and actually then had something that I could refer to. So yes, capture those important things you don't want to forget, but also capture those things that are rattling around in your head that have your attention when you notice that they have your attention. Otherwise, you'll be thinking about them all the time. And that's not a good way to relax, it's not a good way to rest, it's not a good way to empty your stress bucket. The last GTD concept that I'd like to talk about in relation to supporting your mental health is the horizons of focus. The horizons of focus can feel a bit abstract the first time that you're introduced to them. And as such, perhaps aren't something that people engage with, particularly when they're feeling overwhelmed. But in this context, I think they can be really useful. So the horizons of focus starts on the ground level with your actions, your calendars, the things you're going to do on a day-to-day basis. Next level up from that are your projects. They're the things that are achievable in up to a year, could be a week, could be a couple of days, could be a month, that require more than one step to action. The next step up from that, your areas of focus they're not things you do, they're more about who you are, what you're responsible for. So for example, I'm a GTD trainer, I'm also a dad, I'm also a trumpet player, I'm also an enthusiastic home brewer, I'm also a bad amateur photographer. These are areas of responsibility, areas of focus, things that are important to me. Next level up are things that you want to achieve in the next 2 to 3 years. If you really want to achieve those things in 2 to 3 years, what could you start doing now in order to deliver on that? And then the next horizon up from that, again, is a longer term goal. What do we want to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years? That might be a new job, it might be working in a different country, those kind of things. But then right at the top of that pyramid is your purpose and principles. Or as David puts it, what really matters to you, no matter what. These are your values, these are why you're on the planet. And something that comes through a lot in the conversation that I've had with people when they've been feeling particularly anxious or stressed on a day-to-day basis and it's starting to really get them, is that it's feeling like they are acting out of whack with their values. They're misaligned from what's important to them. Maybe the company they work for is not in line with their ethics, potentially. Or maybe it's really important to them to spend time with their children and they're not spending as much time with their children as they would like. Or maybe they really, really love horse riding, but they haven't been horse riding for ages because things have just got too busy. And that can really affect the way that we feel about things. And from the point of view of our stress bucket, the guilt that we feel about not doing things that are important to us can add to our stress. And doing those things that we really, really love can reduce our stress bucket, it can help empty our stress bucket. So thinking about our purpose and principles can really give us a sense of what things we could be doing more of or less of in order to enable our stress bucket to be more manageable. So just to wrap up, there are really 4 things for us to think about. Understand your stress bucket. Think about your stress bucket. Know how big it is, know what fills it, and most importantly, know what empties it. In order to stop things getting in there that don't need to be in there, use the 5 phases of mastering workflow in order to help you make decisions about things that come into your world and to enable you to take action on them at the right time. Particularly use capture to get things out of your head, and that's not just transactional things that you might need to do, but ideas that your brain is turning over, because if they're there all the time, then they're not going to be helping you to relax, and potentially you're going to end up talking yourself out of them or turning them into a source of worry themselves. And finally, investigate your purpose and principles. think about what's really, really important to you, because that will both help you to understand what's getting into your bucket, but also how to empty your bucket out. I'm going to stop saying bucket now. I appreciate I've said it often enough that it's probably lost all meaning. Thanks for listening. I hope this has been useful. My name's Tim. I'll see you again soon.